when it became clear was when it was at its worst, I was getting so like frightened for the nights because I began to like literally my heart would beat faster when the sun was setting because I was like, oh no, I'm going to have another night of no sleep. I mean,
Welcome to Zestful Aging, where I interview thoughtful, inspiring, and influential guests who are making their mark on the world and contributing to the common good. Making your mark, big or small, is creating a legacy. It's one of the proven ways we can age with vibrance and energy. And Zestful Aging Podcast is my legacy. I'm your host, Nicole Christina, psychotherapist and fellow Zestful Ager. And our music is courtesy of Judy Banker, who was a previous guest on Zestful Aging. And you can find out more about Judy at judybanker.com. And to find out more about this podcast, my web courses, and other offerings, hop on over to zestfulaging.com. Well, I've got my little loyal Jack Russell Sparky right by my side. He's wondering when he's going to get a walk, and that will be happening soon. Hello, loyal listeners. I want to invite you to a free international web conference I'm participating in that's going to be excellent. It's the Envisage 2020 web conference on challenging ageism towards women. Join us November 14th from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for the intergenerational conversations on many topics having to do with aging and ageism. We're going to explore how to be anti-ageist and age-inclusive in our own lives. They've brought together some great guests, so mark your calendars for the Envisage 2020 web conference. It's totally free, and you can find out more on my website, zestfulaging.com. I hope to see you there. Let's begin. We have a really great interview for you today. We're going to be talking about a super relevant issue, especially in these turbulent times. And I wonder if you knew that poor sleep is one of the most common reasons people see their doctors. We've been hearing more and more about the importance of sleep, and Arianna Huffington wrote a book about it, and she's an evangelist for good sleep. But I think many of us are still a bit confused why we need sleep, how much is enough, do people differ in their needs for sleep? And so I'm really excited to learn more about this, and I'd like to introduce Mollie McGlocklin. She's the creator of Sleep is a Skill. It's a company that optimizes people's sleep through a unique blend of technology, accountability, and behavioral change. And the company was born from scratching her own itch and a lifetime of poor sleep habits culminated into a mega challenging bout of insomnia for months without end. And with a background in psychology and human behavior, she went down the rabbit hole to solve her own sleep disturbances without using sleeping aids. She became fascinated with chronobiology and, by extension, its practical applications to restore a state of homeostasis, not only to her sleep, but also to her life as a whole. So knowing the difference between a life with sleep and without, she's now dedicated her life to sharing the forgotten skill set of sleep. Welcome to the show, Mollie.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It is a pleasure to be here, and I'm excited to dive in with you. This is going to be great.
Oh, yes, me as well. And I love the expression scratching your own itch.
Oh, yeah.
Tell us the story of why you became so fascinated with sleep.
Sure. Yeah. So really this company, Sleep is a Skill, was born out of, as you read through on the bio, of really from my own issues. So I really want to start with the fact that so many of these problems that so many people will come to sleep as a skill around, I have been there. I have done all the things not to do, honestly, for many years. And so what that looked like was just having a lot of negative sort of labels or disempowering labels around my sleep. And I'm a bad sleeper, I'm a short sleeper, I'm a night owl, I'm a this, I'm a that, and like a fixed state of being, right? And it was like that for many, many years. And as I got older, I didn't correlate some of as I was getting more anxious. I was an entrepreneur in the middle of Manhattan and just kind of burning the candle at both ends, and started going to bed later and later. And, just all these sort of things just became more exacerbated. But I didn't connect how that was impacting, my health and my well-being until I went through my own period of insomnia. And during that, it was real. I got to see what life is like, with virtually no sleep. And during that time, what was really eye-opening was one, at my worst point, I was traveling internationally, and this is when this was all happening with jet lag thrown into the mix. And I went to the doctors in Croatia with Google Translate, and it was like, I can't sleep, help.
Wow.
Yeah, and I left with, because they didn't quite know what to do with me and couldn't even speak the language, so I left with a prescription for it was their version of Ambien, their generic version for Ambien.
Dear.
In that moment, it was a very scary thing, because I did take Ambien for, there was a solid couple months of, having some of that. And during that period, it was so like an internal battle of knowing, okay, this is where is this going? What is the path here, and what is the plan? And I really just felt very shameful and alone on that. And so, that same obsessive tendency that probably got me into that space then also thankfully ended up being just something that I'm so grateful for, because it actually shifted my entire life. So now, from that point, not only was able to heal, my issues with my sleep, but actually learn to cultivate optimized sleep that I had certainly never had in my life. And, quantifiably from all the sleep tech that, we can certainly get into, being able to measure that and really use it as kind of a barometer for how I'm, for how life is working for me. And then using that element of sleep as such a great indicator of, okay, I'm getting a little more stressed, pulling things back, doing what we know to do, foundational kind of work. And it's really transformed everything for me. So while it was happening, I can assure you I was a very negative state, and just was from this place that there's nothing good that could possibly come out of this. But then when I went, hindsight's 2020, looking back, it was one of the best things that happened to me. So I do think there can be something that our body can give and teach us when we do go through these disrupted sleep periods, if we're willing to do the work necessary to restore it.
I'm curious because certainly there's how do we say this? If you're an entrepreneur in Manhattan, I think it's still stylish to burn the candle at both ends, even though, we know Arianna Huffington said, this is a myth and look what happened to me. I'm going to write a book, and people are doing things with sleep hygiene, and it's becoming, more well known. But I still think that there's some kind of status, and it does seem to be sort of in fashion to be drinking multiple cups of coffee and saying, I'm just this close to burnout, but I'm so productive and my life is just so crazy, I don't have any choice. When did you get to the point where you thought, okay, this is no longer it's unsustainable?
Yeah, really great points about the kind of the social fabric around the conversation with sleep. I mean, we were like 3 blocks away from where Gary Vaynerchuk's space is, and a lot of people know of his like hustle hard. And he's fantastic, right? Like inspiring for sure. But if taken to the extreme, then that burnout or lack of sustainability for sure can show up. So for me, when it became clear was when it was at its worst, I was getting so like frightened for the nights because I began to like literally my heart would beat faster when the sun was setting because I was like, oh no, I'm going to have another night of no sleep. I mean, this is certainly not a way to relate to something that for so much of our lives we can take for granted or just assume obviously it's innate and given to all of us, and yet that's why I do get the irony of saying that sleep is a skill when it's something we came out being naturally able to do,
really good at. Yeah.
Right. And for thousands of years, hunter gatherers, if we're looking at this conversation around I mentioned chronobiology and circadian rhythms as part of that element that I had really been just mind blown when I started learning about that for so many thousands of years, we did have a very, for the most part, strong circadian rhythm is what we understand it to be because we were so linked up with the rhythms of nature for so very long. And really what we're talking about now is that we're in a time that really post-Edison, the ability to augment our days to 24/7 capabilities wasn't an option in the same way that it is now and become so normalized.
Because of the light. Am I right about
yes,
that? Up with the sun, down with the sun.
Exactly. And that's what's so fascinating. The power of light in this conversation around sleep is really, I think we're only at the beginning stages of it beginning to hit kind of, the mass conversation, because if you go into the sleep conversation, sleep camp, if you go into circadian rhythm chronobiology, we've got a lot of data around the importance of light and how much that plays one of the number one impactors for the strength of our circadian rhythm. And yet, the average, certainly when I was not sleeping well, I really had no real respect for how upside down my relationship to light in general was and what that would even do to my health and mental health and my anxiety levels and stress. And so really getting more connected to that and what that can look like. And because for me, it was as simple as I was living pretty upside down because I would wake up late. I would be in kind of dim environment. I might have a headache. I might whatever, not getting outside until much later. So then when the biggest shots of light would come, that would be often in the evening when I turn on all the artificial light. You really, really do a number on your body. And then we don't even understand it. It's not just like regulated to sleep itself. It then gets extended to our hormonal production, the body's ability to know when to release cortisol, when to release melatonin, so many neurotransmitters. There's so much that gets controlled by that master clock in our brain and in these little clocks in virtually every cell in our body. So I think it's just a really exciting area that is beginning to, find a home in more everyday conversations. I think a big part of it has actually come from is pretty resounding, or certainly at least correlative and possibly, a causation element around what's linked as sleep deprivation and neurodegenerative issues. So Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia. And that came out in more recent years of understanding. It all goes back to this ability to this, what we call lymphatic drainage. And probably a lot of people have heard of lymphatic drainage, but lymphatic drainage is really just the ability for the brain to do some kind of deep cleaning at night, which happens primarily in deep sleep in the first half of the night. And if we're not prioritizing our sleep, like I was for many years not doing that, then you're not able to go through that brain cleansing kind of properties. So for so many people that, as we know, Alzheimer's, Parkinson's, dementia are all areas that people are really looking to have that ability to prevent. And so now seeing that this really might be a big key to that puzzle, it's starting to kind of get into more mainstream of the importance around this. But, back to your original question, yes, I think there still is that status that comes about from shirking that and, go to bed late, wake up early, you grind it out, and that's how it goes. And that was the narrative I was in for a very long time.
Hey everyone, I wanted to tell you about a powerful new tool that supports your mental and emotional health in what are extremely trying times. And you may remember that I've been a psychotherapist for 30 years, and I'm always a little suspicious of products that claim to help us feel less anxious, depressed, or worried. But then I was introduced to a new kind of app called Cope Notes, and I have become a big fan. Cope Notes was developed by a guy who spent a lot of his life trying to figure out what might help support him through his own weekly psychotherapy sessions. Cope Notes is an app that gives you random texts through the day to break through some of the negative messages that might be repeating in your head. It's well researched and has been adopted by many mental health facilities. I highly recommend it. I think we can all use a little support right now. So check out copenotes.com/zestful. I will receive a small portion of those proceeds. And I'd love to hear your feedback about how it works for you. Now back to the show. I wanted to just share this example, and I know you're really into the research, but this is something I had never considered. I was coming out of the first restaurant I had been in months and months and months. Sure. And it's a place I would never have gone before, but it's a long, not that interesting story. But when we came out, it was late. It was very late. It was 11:30 or something, and it was in the mall. Well, that's another story. I hate the mall. But anyway, yes. So the lights are, of course, in the parking lot, beaming, full bright, full there. And all of a sudden, I noticed, why are there seagulls here? You know, it was like 11:30 at night, and I thought, don't they need to go to sleep? Why are they there? And my biologist husband explained to me that they were confused by the light, and that we're also finding that with deer in our neighborhoods here in upstate New York, because there's so much artificial light, they're getting all screwed up, and so they're walking around at daytime in full view, and the nocturnal animals, the raccoons and all, are also confused. So yes. It's so interesting to me that this is biology. This isn't a choice we get to make. This is baked in, hardwired, and, you know, we can't really fight against this.
Yes. Yeah, that's such wow, what a great example, and so awesome of your husband to, kind of be able to take it deeper. That's really very compelling. It's a great example because from as humans, we of course are diurnal creatures, meaning that we're meant to be active during the day and at rest at night. And with the advent of this, 24-hour light, it's because of course, we might think about there's so many other things that are keeping us up too. There's smartphones, there's computers, there's all of these things which are also a big part of the story. But the origin piece of the kind of beginnings of some of this disruption, and then because not only back when the first light bulb was invented, then that still had a larger percentage of warmer light being emitted from it versus, so if you think of like, those nice restaurants you go to and they have like the Edison bulbs and they're kind of like dim and right, it's kind of pretty and romantic-y. Whereas now, certainly in the 80s and beyond was when a lot of bills were enacted for energy efficient bulbs and then LEDs later on and all of those. And so the percentage or breakdown in those lights are much, much more blue centric or cool centric. So with that, what we've found is that really disrupts our melatonin production. And it's not just like a little amount and kind of like, oh, well, wouldn't that be nice? But like, I'm sure there's so many other things to do about sleep. No, this is the place to begin because, it's actually fascinating. I just attended the Sleep Conference 2020, and they had just tons of sleep researchers and doctors sharing all their findings. And one study was pointing to its work with NASA and dynamic lighting versus static lighting. And what was fascinating was they would show when people were, and this is very important for NASA, for astronauts to be able to stay on a circadian timeline even when they're in the space shuttle, because the sun rises and sets virtually every 90 minutes depending on the trajectory and where they're at. So it's very confusing.
Oh my goodness.
So they get really connected to this light conversation. So they do a lot of work to maintain dynamic lighting throughout the entire course of their trip in space. So what we can learn about that is that they do kind of comparisons of, okay, so what would happen if astronauts are exposed to the same old static lighting the whole time versus dynamic lighting. So what they find is just the melatonin production is so much more pronounced versus the people that are in that same old static lighting all day long. That looks almost kind of like this little blip of melatonin. A little bit still gets produced, but it's nothing compared to that dynamic lighting. So it's a fantastic, very important place to begin in this conversation. Of course, there's more things that we can do. Temperature is another thing that plays a really strong element into our circadian rhythm. And so that thermoregulation is really important. We're aiming to drop our temperature, body temperature, by about 2 to 3 degrees each night on average, which might not sound like a lot, but it really is quite a bit, because the body does everything to maintain that homeostasis with temperature.
So what does that look like, Mollie? That looks like cracking the window. What?
Yes.
Give me some practical ideas about what needs to happen.
Absolutely. So what we really want to do, if we're spanning, taking a step back, we want to create 2 clear parts to the day, very similar to how hunter-gatherers would have been. The sun sets, it's pretty dark, and then it gets cold. So we want to kind of create that similar element for ourselves, even if we're indoor living and so disconnected from that rhythm. So artificially, what we want to do is around when the sun is setting, that's when you can both dim the lights and actually cool in your ambient temperature, so you can make that drop that down pretty significantly, and certainly when you're sleeping. So our goal when we're sleeping is to be in those mid 60s. And so and I've talked to so many people and they're like, oh, the temperature is not a problem. I definitely sleep cool. And then you ask what it is, and it's 73, 70, whatever. So when we're able to move that down a bit, that can really help make a difference with the quality of your sleep, but also just that sleep onset. So the body's ability to know that yes, it is time to sleep, to produce this amount of melatonin, and to kind of down-regulate brain states, brain activities, a lot that can happen there. So a couple other things, if you think about temperature, there's a number of things that will influence temperature, but some of the most common food timing is a big one. So I used to really backload most of my caloric intake would be at night, and just that kind of in front of the TV, eating and just sort of, oh, this is my relaxation time, all of that sort of narrative. And unfortunately, having no idea that then that would show up the next morning and how I felt after that night of sleep, while the body's having to digest that.
I see.
Right. So
too much work,
and it really raises the bodily our body temperature.
That's right.
Right. So it's a confusing set of signals. And so, doctors have done this in the past. If they know they have to work a night shift, okay, well, I'll just make sure I also eat my food later on. And that will be another signal to keep the body, must think, okay, we're getting energy. We must need to be doing something. And so, in keeping that temperature up. Another one, of course, is alcohol. That's one of the easiest, most point-to-able ones where our body temperature goes up. And while it might help with sleep onset, that can be very problematic for the keeping us asleep. So the fragmentation element of our sleep, the quality of the sleep that we're getting into. And then another one is exercise, but it's below meal timing in its importance for the most part. But of course, if you're, say, doing a lot of strenuous exercise late at night, I do actually have clients that have, busy days, and then they don't get into the gym until really late, it'll be like 8:30 classes, 9 or whatever, right?
And they're revving up.
They're revving up, and they're under blue light often, so that will even double whammy.
Wow.
But then the heart,
and then they have a beer.
Yes, exactly, down wine. Oh,
the trifecta.
Exactly. And I feel too so much for people in these situations, because I was there. In the worst, when I couldn't sleep, that was one of the things I tried to. I was in Madrid, and I was like, okay, maybe if I have a drink, maybe that will help. So you try things, and you're running on fumes. So I do really understand, and I think that that's why this element of really diving into the skill set, I think, can be one of the most practical things that you can do to really day in, day out, make a difference and give ourselves more energy. So, as far as those practical things around the temperature, lowering the temperature at night, but even before bed. So, when the sun's setting, to help cue us that this is our relaxation time, kind of downshifting as far as things that we're doing mentally, because actually really interesting element is that our thoughts can actually heat up our body to a degree. There's actually sleep gadgets on the market that will cool your prefrontal cortex if you are someone that has chronic insomnia and kind of hyper-aroused brain activity. They find that the brain actually gets warmer during all of that rumination or excitatory,
goodness.
Right? So it's an actual studied, kind of sleep tech. So if we go back, that can help us underscore the importance of our thoughts and how it can actually have a real physical result in the world.
Wow, there's so much here. And I know that people are going to want to hear a little bit more guidance about eating and food. And it sounds like what you're saying is front loading your calories is much more in the natural rhythm of how they're best metabolized.
Yes. So a couple things about that. One, of course, since this is our company's really built on technology, accountability, and behavioral change, to really drive it home from a tech perspective, I will often have clients wearing continuous glucose monitors, like I have mine on right now, and that can really, really be interesting, and just paint it in black and white that our glucose even runs on our circadian rhythm and has preferential times to eat versus other times. So you can do lots of fun tests. If you're as nerdy as I am, I find this very fun. That you can take the same type of meal, right, and have it in the for breakfast at like 8 a.m. And then you can take that exact same meal and have it at 8 p.m. And for most people, there would be a very different result for their glucose, just based on that time of day. And of course, glucose is really an interesting one because there's so much you can also do to help with spikes, so activity can help blunt glucose spikes. So having like a nice little walk after your meals. There's lots that you can do to support this, but either way, the timing difference is a big one. So if you can test with moving that meal timing back, really that like early bird special type of timeline for dinners, people that are doing that are onto something, because it's allows much more time for our body to then digest this before going into bed. Going into bed and sleeping is really, there's a lot that's so important that we want to prioritize during that. We don't want the body's ability to heal itself, do all the things that we know to be so important, getting distracted by something just that doesn't need to be there and really never would have been there in history. Because if you think back again, if we used to be so tethered to the rhythms of nature as from a blueprint perspective, when that sun would set, I mean, it was pretty much party over for the most part. Maybe there'd be like a bonfire or something, but you can't really go hunting. You're not refrigerating stuff.
Yeah, you can't do anything.
So there's no snacking. There's no leftover. It's just like, it's kind of that. And so, and by design, our body has, if we have a strong circadian rhythm, leptin and ghrelin are really meant to help support us in the evenings to kind of downshift us, because it would be really distracting for, those hunter-gatherers to be so starving when they're trying to go to sleep because they can't go and get anything. So it was really meant by design to actually help support us that we're not hungry during that period. And some people might notice this too, like say if their circadian rhythm is a little more weak and they're hungry when they go to bed, but they wake up and they're like, oh, interesting, I'm not as hungry anymore. It's kind of by design. It's all all meant to work so that it's not a distracting element. But if that can be a really good cue that your circadian rhythm might be a little off, out of alignment, because if you are finding that you're one of these people, oh, I'm ravenous in the middle of the night. I've had people that wake up and then they go eat in the middle of the night. All of those things could be big cues that there's some work to do around that. And that continuous glucose monitor can help really, bring that home, because when we do have glucose drops, that's the big part where often we'll find wake ups. So people have high glucose when they're going to sleep because they just ate. And then while they're sleeping, it crashes. And when the crash happens is when the body responds with cortisol and adrenaline, because it's kind of a concerning moment. And that's when you get the wake up, right?
I see.
Yeah.
It all makes so much sense. And, I think about how this translates to the world of psychotherapy and how we really are, it's an old device. This device we're working with hasn't really been updated. And, we were talking, actually today we're speaking on 9/11 and talking to people and their trauma and wondering, why am I still traumatized? And we talk about how the body holds on to those memories for really good reason, and how evolution is something we really have to appreciate and respect, why we're built the way we're built.
Absolutely. Very good point.
So talk to me, not to belabor the point, but I am an eating disorder specialist, and I know a lot of people will want to understand more about the food. Can you talk to us about like getting up, having a meal, and then when is it time to shut down the kitchen?
Oh, wow. I didn't know that background. That's awesome. Very important area. And it's we don't want to create any sort of added stress or anything around this area for people, for sure. So instead, what we can do is just point to some things that certainly intuitive eating being so important. If never want people really feeling so unbearably hungry or something before bed, we want to speak to that. And for a general outlook, what we're looking to cultivate for many years, it's kind of been, okay, so at least 2 hours before bed, really aiming to kind of be like kitchen closed. Okay. So that's been that element. But now there's even more kind of interesting research coming out around pushing that back even a little bit more. So trying around 3 hours, 4 hours before bed, really stopping to eat. And so of course we want to play with this and test it out for yourself. That's why we really do advocate for people to have, some sleep trackers, in the conversation so that they can at least have a sense of where things have been, and then what happens when they do make some of these changes. But, so of course it depends on the person. If they've got some pre-existing stuff, certainly want to be mindful of that. But with this conversation in general, what we're pushing for people to explore is what happens when we stop eating, that 3 to 4 hours before bed. And then, of course, there's always asterisks for things with people. So for women, if we're still, menstruating, then at different points, which from a chronobiology perspective is fascinating because it's known as our infradian rhythm. It's one of those rhythms that are longer than our daily rhythms of the 24 hours. Our infradian rhythm, so happening every on this 28-day span, that there's different points in our cycle that might be more stressful than others. So, if you're finding that to be stressful in your body or what have you, that might be certainly in the luteal phase when our glucose tends to be higher. That might be a time when we might want to adjust and, have some maybe eating a little bit later on. But for the most part, we're testing out that and seeing what the effects are. And for most people, what we find is it's just really unequivocally. So what the results tend to be is a lowering of heart rate throughout the night, an increase in HRV, so heart rate variability, a lowering of body temperature throughout the night when we're not eating, and then a lowering of our respiratory rate, so how kind of hard or how much you're having to breathe throughout the night. So all of those can really be positive signs to then wake up the next day feeling more refreshed. And what's really interesting is, so I have all my clients have to wear one of the, at least one sleep tracker. And so I can track them from anywhere in the world. And it's fascinating because there are times when then it kind of gets flagged for me of certain things, that their sleep is, deviating from its norm. And there's often, it can be very close to, when you look at it, those markers, those biometrics can skew to the same way. So when you eat late, it can look very similar to drinking. And so that's a really interesting one. I mean, of course, there's differences in the quantity and quality and all kinds of things, but pointing to the fact that those same things result with drinking is the raise in body temperature, up in respiratory rate, tanking in HRV, up in heart rate. So it has a real measurable difference when we do this. And what people tend to do is get really addicted to feeling as good as you can feel the next day when you just do a couple of these small behavioral changes.
It's a game changer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, from an emotional point, and I'd like to bring this in and get your opinion on this, we know anxiety, depression, anything like this is so much worse when we're not sleeping.
Yes.
Right. And so I guess I want to ask you, in our current time when people are just bereft, I guess is the word that comes to mind in so many different I'm talking to clients and they don't even know where to start. It's like, well, the West Coast is burning. We've got, and so it's like we just don't have enough time to cover all of the profound negative experiences going on around us. What do we do about that in terms of sleep? Is there something that can address the increased anxiety that many of us are feeling?
Yes. And I mean, I think it's no coincidence that the amount of traffic that we've been getting to sleep as a skill and, questions around sleep have really skyrocketed during this time of the pandemic, because already this was a problem. And then we kind of just lit a match with a pandemic and all the levels of heightened uncertainty for people, or, lack of structure. So there's a number of things happening for different people. While, you might be someone, my finances are still handled. But to your point, concern around what the future may hold, or suddenly now I'm working from home and I don't have that external structure that I used to have of kind of the 9 to 5 or all of that.
Or my social support.
Yes.
Because,
absolutely. I mean, the list is endless, where it feels as if it's touched all of us in, different ways. So from that place, then what I really make the argument for is that sleep becomes, and I think has always been, but really, especially in times like this, the most important place to begin in that area of health and wellness. Because, I think for so many years, it's like, okay, New Year's resolution, I'm going to get to the gym. I'm going to hire a nutritionist. But we haven't really prioritized, all right, I'm going to really take on my sleep this year is going to be amazing. We don't do that. So I think we could one step into that provides that clear foundation, kind of from a Maslow's hierarchy of needs. We can't go into all of these other levels of optimizing, for our lives until we have those basic needs addressed. And particularly in mental health, oh my goodness, it is just so unequivocal what that does. And from even if we're talking about productivity standpoint, just the amount of errors that people make when we sleep deprive them in different tests and try to have them perform, your performance just totally gets shot. So there's just so many areas. It's very insidious. So if we begin there, then that can be that solid bedrock. So then we can handle all these kind of unprecedented times in a way that's certainly going to up-level us over the alternative, which if we start really allowing that to, to kind of snowball, then often we see all these other problems. So as I spoke to around that glucose conversation, just one clear example that I think many of us can relate to is you have a night of you don't sleep great. And then what follows, even just for a couple nights of acute sleep deprivation, you'll see people's glucose rates really a measurable shift in that. So now we've got our glucose up. Now we tend to be more ravenous. We want the fun stuff, and for that quick hit of energy. So then we got the swings that can often really result in anxiety or just heightened stress. And so now you got that. And if you're sleep deprived, often the first thing that can get cut is movement. That trip to the gym or whatever can get canceled more readily than anything else. So if we just think of on the practical elements of that, and then you expand that over many weeks and months, we're in a very different mental state and ability to deal with what's coming our way.
So it makes me think of being emotionally burnt out and that your body is burnt out.
Yes.
And so I know just a little bit about adrenal gland burnout. Is that something that is part of this?
Oh, yeah. And I'll get a lot of people that will come to Sleep as a Skill, and they've, it might not be their first time, their foray in really trying to get up under their health, and they've done some testing and they've gotten cortisol levels tested. They've found that either it's very high throughout the day or that it's been so kind of burnt out. Now they're just not even experiencing cortisol at all as it relates to that adrenal concerns. And so then I'll have people also like kind of self-medicating and taking as much coffee as possible to get through the day, and various walks around that, all pointing to that level of burnout and how that can relate to sleep. And it can be so maddening because we know that we are so wired and tired, or just that. Yeah, I mean, that was certainly my experience when I couldn't sleep for, it was a bunch of months of just this, I'm exhausted. And yet I have
this. You get like desperate, right?
Yes, you get desperate.
Frightening.
Yeah. And really just like, why, almost like an experience of like that your body feels like it's working against you in those periods because it's so jazzed up and like, on high alert. And yet, have a knowingness that you need sleep. So in those periods, I think it's so important for us to be able to have, people to go to and have a plan and strategy. Certainly, I know that's a more extreme example, but even just on a basic level, when we start to see things, our patterns are kind of, okay, I'm getting a little off the rails here. I'm starting to go to bed much later, waking up earlier, having those wake ups frequently. And that can really compound, but there are so many things we can do to help guide things back to homeostasis.
It makes me think of sleep as like the ultimate self-care.
Yes. Thank you for saying it like that. I completely feel like that. And for me, it's given me just such, levels of, it really feels like it's put me back in the driver's seat, and the same with my clients, because then at least, life is obviously still going to happen. Things are still going to come our way. But if we have this in our back pocket of a real knowingness of what it can take to restore, your sleep if it has gotten a little off track, or to just really continuously get levels of sleep that unfortunately are kind of rare now, that it puts you in this ability to really fully take on life in a way that unfortunately many of us are not equipped to do in the same way when these things are all not working.
Wow, I think we could probably talk for a long, long time because there's so many aspects of this. I mean, it just is intertwined with, every aspect of our physical and mental health. And it's it's foundational. You can't, as you say, you can't optimize your contribution. You can't optimize, using your talents, your skills, in a time that it's so important to be able to do that when you're, you need to be drinking coffee all day. It's just so vitally important.
Yeah.
I think people are going to really want to find out more about this, Mollie. Where can people look into this and find out more about your company and more about how to get good sleep?
Sure. Yeah. So sleepisaskill.com acts as a great bucket for a lot of things. So no matter where you're at, going to that website can give you a couple things to even to get started like today. So one, there's a free downloadable PDF on there that is called the Optimized Bedroom. So it's 18 strategic, kind of tips and strategies to shift around your bedroom space for this optimized sleep, but also from a high tech and a low tech perspective. So kind of some of the latest and greatest around, because sleep tech industry alone is just this huge ballooning area that so many people are getting into, but kind of sifting through the noise of like what can really make a difference and what can we do just on a no tech perspective, and when does that make sense to utilize. So you can download that. You can that will also add you to our weekly newsletter. So if you couldn't tell, I'm pretty obsessive personality. So every Monday I send something called Mollie's Monday Obsessions of just what I'm obsessing over with sleep. I'm like, you gotta check out this new
you gotta cut, listen, just call it what it is.
Yeah, exactly, right? Just cut right to it. So it's like you're gonna get overwhelmed with all kinds of cool, just I think it's cool anyway, sleep topics or tips or tricks, right?
So good.
And so then you can also sign up to listen to the Sleep is a Skill podcast. We have online training courses if you want to go deeper, and then we also have a sleep assessment where you can fill out about your own sleep and kind of get real human beings responding back about your sleep. So either way, there's, no matter where you're at, there's something, a step that you can take to make a difference there.
Wow. I love what you're doing. I'm fascinated by it, and I really appreciate how important it is. And it sounds like if people could just shift a couple things, it could really be life-changing.
Yes. Yeah. And that's really what I believe, because I know in that period when I was just at my wit's end, and it was really, like I said, it's a scary time in my life. I really felt very hopeless at the time. And I thought, is this my new reality? Like, is this how it's always going to be? And yet now knowing that on the other side, what's possible, I mean, I'm so grateful for it. And I hope to also speak to those people that are dealing with their sleep, especially right now. It's such a challenging thing. And yet that on the other side of that, there can be some really tremendous gifts that can come from even sleep disturbance, because it can certainly propel us into action. When we're that tired, we're willing to try different things that we might not normally do. And on the other side of that can definitely be levels of, peace and kind of groundedness that we might not have had otherwise.
Oh, that is such a gift. I so appreciate your passion about this, and it's such a lovely thing when we can experience something difficult, figure it out, and then pass it on as a legacy and say, look, you don't have to go through what I went through. Let me give you some help here. I'll save you some time and anguish.
Yes. Exactly. I don't want people to have to go through all the dead ends that I went through will hypnosis help? Will this help? Will this meditation help? And not to say those can be wonderful, and, having just a bit more of a strategy or plan, I think, and support can make a big difference.
Understanding that this isn't magic. There's a reason. And I love, the historical part about, like, we got some light bulb problems here. It's not, and it makes total sense. And it's not you. It's not a character flaw. There's not, but we're setting it up to fail here. And if we understand that we're mammals, and that we understand our history, it all kind of fits into place.
It all fits. And what you said, you began this podcast with, going to take my dog for a walk, right? The dog, my clients that have dogs or have animals that they have to get outside, I often say they win the day, because they're the people that rain or shine tend to get themselves outside. Yeah. And it sounds so basic, but that exposure to full spectrum light from the sun, it has a name. It's called sunlight anchoring. And if you're doing that first thing in the morning, that is one of the most powerful things to anchor in that circadian rhythm and tell your body, okay, we're doing this. No more melatonin. We're into cortisol right now, and a number of kind of cascade of hormonal responses occur, and then you can anticipate that later on in the evening you will be getting tired earlier based on when you got your first shot of full spectrum light.
Oh, wow.
So really have some strategy around that. So I applaud you for getting outside with your dog.
Well,
That's great.
There's it's not always in the morning, and since I'm in
Yes.
Syracuse, you got a 65% chance that the sun will not be out, but it's okay. I mean, we all have to take vitamin D here, but and we can do another episode on this, but there's so much research about just walking under a tree,
Yes.
and getting out. It's
I forgot that you're in Syracuse.
Yeah,
I went to
yeah.
school in Syracuse at Syracuse
Okay.
University. So
Well,
yes, I know it well, and that lake effect and all. Yes,
you
so-
got the terminology. Yes,
Yes.
yes. Most of my clients come from Syracuse University, and so that's something in common. Well, it has been absolutely delightful and educational, and I'm pretty up on health and wellness stuff, but I did not know about getting my good shot of sunlight anchoring. I am going to start thinking about that, and because I see clients late into the night, sometimes I eat dinner late. I'm going to shift that, and I really appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom. I think my audience is going to make some, my hope is that they'll make some changes that are really life affirming. We'll call
Yes,
it.
absolutely. Well, that's so wonderful. Certainly keep me posted on that progress, because that is fantastic. Nothing makes me happier than hearing those stories. So keep me posted, and it's just been a pleasure to speak with you. I really appreciate it.
Oh, you as well. Thank you, Molly.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you so much for joining us on Zestful Aging. If you like the podcast, please share it with some of your friends. I love to hear from my listeners. Send me an email at NicoleChristina.com. It's no secret that everyone's feeling pretty restless and unsettled right now. Our lives are upside down, and the future is feeling pretty uncertain. But if you're anything like me, organizing my stuff can help me feel a little calmer. It's something I can do to help me feel a little more in control and in charge of my own life. If you think decluttering could help you feel better and you could use a little assistance with that, check out the online course I've developed with professional organizer and designer Carrie Luderin. It's called Too Much Stuff. And Too Much Stuff is different from other courses or articles or guidance you may have used up. We give you clear steps to deal with the clutter and the tools to help you face the overwhelming feelings and the emotions that come up when we're going through our clutter. And a lot of those emotions are just feeling anxious or guilty or just basically flooded with a lot of different confusing feelings. The course is really practical. It's realistic. The lessons are short and punchy, and they're really manageable. We're not trying to set you up for some long exploratory, super in-depth, burdensome experience. We want something really helpful for you right now. We all need help with our anxiety. So being surrounded by more calm and less chaos can really help. So now's a good time to clear out the clutter so we can focus on what's really important in our lives. So find out more at zestfulaging.com. You'll see more about this under the web courses tab. If you have any questions, just shoot me an email at zestfulaging@gmail.com. Thanks so much. And stay tuned next week for another interview with a fascinating and inspiring guest.